I gotta
This call
start.
is being recorded.
Welcome back to Front Runner, and today we have Steve Cody from Rockify, and Steve's the CEO and founder of Rockify, which is a peer-to-peer sharing, and what it is that individuals can share what they have as personal assets. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Steve, there's such a movement out there in terms of the sharing economy, and this has long-term implications, manyfold. For example, we all have assets of some kind which we may not be using all the time. So sharing those and is really a great way to make better use of the kinds of assets that we have out there. Secondly, it's really interesting because the sharing economy also gives people an opportunity to tap into a revenue stream, which we would traditionally consider to be, a corporate kind of endeavor. You know, they provide an offering or a product of some kind, maybe like a car rental service, and individuals couldn't tap into that kind of revenue stream. So it provides people an opportunity to, in a way, become self-employed outside of their normal employment. So my sense of it is that this is going to change the sharing economy is going to change society and the economy as a whole in at least two profound ways. One is better use of assets out there, which has huge implications in environmental impact. And secondly, by providing individuals the opportunity to earn revenue. And I'm wondering, Steve, based on what you're seeing out there, how far can this sharing economy go? Like you're tapping into individuals that have assets or space. I mean, what's it going to look like in, let's say, 5 to 10 years from now?
Yeah, well, I mean, a bunch of great questions there for sure. And I think, you know, we started this about 2.5 years ago, and I can, just the whole kind of sharing economy and the acceptance of it, and just, I mean, even clothing retailers wanting to be a part of it. It's really, really opened it up, and I think what's the real spark behind it is the environmental impact. And I mean, just if we look at ourselves, we're having an economist right now do a study. We want to figure out what's the impact that we can have on the environment, because if we're using technology and we're using our community to facilitate kind of sharing of assets, that means a lot less buying for the world. And, that just means we're digging a lot less holes, or there's a lot less ships going to and from China. I mean, it's unbelievable. Give you one example, where we rent RVs. The average RV is used 4% of the time throughout the entire year. So that's 96% of the time that RV is sitting in your driveway or at a storage facility. So, if we can enable people to safely share their RV with others, if we can get that utilization up to 20, 30, 40%, that's a lot less tires that need to be made. It's a lot less steering wheels. It's just a lot less of everything that the planet has to make and then the planet has to dispose of. So the environment, I think, is the main driver. And that's really the feedback that we're getting. I had somebody from works at Home Depot Rentals, for example, and they rented a chainsaw on our platform, and somebody told me about it. I had to call the person and say, why did you rent from us? Why didn't you get a discount there and whatnot? And he said, I did it because of what Rockify stands for. He says he knew when he signed up, we planted a tree on his behalf, and he knew as soon as he transacted, we planted another tree on his behalf. So that environmental impact was huge. If we talk about now, I think, in terms of people being able to make money with the sharing economy, I can think of one really recent story that we have a partner. His name is Ron. He's a DJ, and he started to Rockify probably about a year ago. And he had back surgery, actually some pretty serious surgery, and he was in the hospital for a month. But he sent me a picture from his hospital bed with his phone in his hand, telling me he had just booked 3 orders, 3 Rockify orders from his bed. So so his whole thing was, this is amazing. I'm still making money. So it's very, very easy to do. The technology enables you to do that. But if we go kind of a step further, I don't think it's going to be long, and it's maybe 3 to 5 years is when we start looking at assets. We're going to start, now we look at it and you think about the monthly payment. You bought the boat or you bought the car, and what's that monthly payment? And I think we're not far away from looking at that asset and thinking, how much is that asset making me? Not versus how much is it costing me? And that's really, I think, going to come from Tesla. If you buy a Tesla, that car, when it's autonomous, is going to become a rental vehicle for you. It's going to drop you off at work, and then it's going to go to work. It might be rented out to somebody else. And when people start to look at their car, you're going to have one person that owns maybe a BMW or a Mercedes is paying $800, $1,000 a month for the car, and then you've got somebody who owns a Tesla and is actually making $800 to $1,000 a month. So we're going to start looking at our assets and saying, how can we start making money with these assets? And we're already seeing it. So, we've got landscapers calling us. They want to buy a Bobcat. Well, they can't really afford the monthly payment because they don't always need the Bobcat. So how much can I make on Ruckify? Oh my God. Okay, I can actually make money owning the Bobcat. It's not going to cost me money. So we're definitely starting to see that shift. And people look at home ownership. Look at the people. I was with somebody, they own 3 homes on Airbnb. 2 weeks ago, I was with somebody, they own 5 Mercedes that they have on Turo. They rent out their cars, right? So it's already starting, and technology has enabled us to make this possible.
And as you allude to, Steve, that changes the whole concept of ownership. Do we actually have to own something, or is it more important to have access to something? Or akin to that, is it more important to have control over something without necessarily having the ownership? So it changes assets from, as you said earlier, from maybe depreciating assets into ones in which we can actually earn a revenue stream. And I can imagine somebody today who has a home, who has a vehicle, who has other things, who maybe comes home at the end of the day, rents out their chainsaw on Ruckify, rents out their apartment, maybe on Airbnb, or rents out
Or Ruckify.
or Ruckify. Ruckify, I imagine, is going to do all of those things. So they have some space, they have an asset, and they simply, at the end of the day, they come home and they go through all their transactions, renting this, renting that. And then on the other side of it, people who don't need an asset all the time can simply just have access to it, or in a way control. In other words, maybe they can reserve in advance so that they're actually controlling that asset to some extent during a particular time period. And that changes the entire business model of how we think of things. And assets, in the traditional accounting sense, depreciate over time. They lessen in value. A car will depreciate over time, but if we can also make money on it, and maybe at the minimum we can break even, as you say, with the Bobcat, maybe we can actually make money. So I'm starting to think that with the sharing economy, this changes the concept of from ownership to access or control of it. And I'm wondering whether out there you're starting to see that idea in people's minds as well, or are they still thinking, I could put an object up there for a few dollars and rent it, whatever, get some money off of it. But on the people who are doing the renting, like they're actually renting an object from somebody else, are you seeing that mind shift in them to think in terms of assets of control and access rather than ownership? Are we as society starting to see that coming?
Great question. And yeah, it's when you see it happening, it's a generational thing. And I think, I'm 51, and when I grew up, buying a house and buying a car and buying things were my trophies, right? That's how you kind of went through life. And when you look at younger people today, they're way smarter than we were. Their trophies are their pictures on Instagram, the experiences that they have with their friends. They don't really care about buying anything. I met a lady was in London 2 weeks ago. We were at a conference, and she was stressed out because she had to sign a 2-month lease. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, that was to live, right? And they don't want to be tied down to anything. They want freedom of mobility. They just want to enjoy their lives, and that's a lot more important than just owning something that's going to sit in your driveway or sit in your garage. And I mean, to me, they've got to figure it out way better than we did. So, just from a generational thing, there's no question they're completely comfortable with doing that. They literally don't want to own this stuff, and a lot of them, like, they don't have the room to store this stuff. I've been in rentals my entire career. Typically, we did rentals because people needed to rent something. Now people are renting things on Ruckify because they want to rent something, right? They want to go skiing, they want to go snowshoeing, they want to take a better picture with a better camera. They don't need to do these things; they want to do these things, and they just instinctively know that they don't actually have to buy these things in order to do these things. If that
And
makes
that
sense.
also, yeah, it does. It means that the perspective on life and how we experience life changes as well. Like, previously, if one wanted to enjoy the cottage life, then one had to buy a cottage and a boat and all of
Yeah,
those things,
and then cut
and
the grass, okay, do the
and cut the
maintenance, and like
grass.
forget it, rent the damn thing. Yeah.
And now, this week we can experience cottage life, next week yacht life, maybe the week after that, a nice apartment in a downtown city somewhere overlooking the main part of the city. The week after that, we're off doing something else. So it really, by not being linked to the assets, I imagine you're seeing out there that the shift in people's thinking that they can enjoy life in a much broader way because they're not having to enjoy life based on one set of assets, but they can enjoy it based on many sets of assets.
There's total freedom in what we offer, right? It's total freedom because you're not, like, just like you said, you're not tied to anything. You can experience many things, and it's going to, it's going to cost you a fraction of what it would the other way. So, for myself, it's, you had to kind of buy a few things, and those were the few things you would do because you couldn't afford to buy more things. But now you can literally just go out and experience things. If we look this past weekend, we had in Ottawa, we had Winterlude, and there were hundreds of pairs of skates that were rented on our platform. Well, that's hundreds of pairs of skates that didn't have to get bought, and maybe some of those people wouldn't have bought and would never have experienced skating. So that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it changes the very definition of what it means to be wealthy. Wealthy doesn't mean that you own something, it means you have access to it.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Wow, very
amazing.
cool. So let's go back to the environmental impact. And,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, um, much more opportunities for reuse of products, much less need for buying of products. So those are going to have tremendous environmental impacts. I'm wondering, other than the reuse or the lesser buying of the product, I'm wondering whether this will shift the economy so that people will purposefully buy certain kinds of products because of its sharing potential. So for right now, we might look at a product and say, okay, this is really good for me, but maybe someday we'll also be buying products by thinking, this is really good for other people too, and therefore I'll buy it to enjoy it, but I also purposefully buy it because other people will enjoy it at the same time. Now that doesn't work for all products. And I imagine there are some products which are very personal in nature, and you wouldn't want to share that. But I can imagine going to a store and thinking, okay, this this wheelbarrow works for me, but I'll purposefully buy it because it also works for other people. I wonder whether you're seeing that mental shift taking place.
Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely seeing that. So, and again, I think it's number one, the first thing that has to happen is ownership doesn't have to mean as much as it meant to us generationally, right? So, as soon as you kind of disconnect yourself from feeling that you have to own it for it to be meaningful. We've got a gentleman, he's on our team. He came here from Brazil and moved into Canada, snowing, never seen snow before. But the community bought one snowblower and they share the snowblower. So snowblower is also on Ruckify. So if they wanted to rent it outside of, the little tight group of neighbors, somebody can actually Ruckify it on the platform. So we had somebody else was buying supboards. And it wasn't about making money. They've got them on Ruckify. They went out a lot last summer. But it was more about meeting like-minded people. So that's what they were excited about. They knew people wanted to learn about supboarding. They just wanted to kind of share their love of supboarding, right? So there's kind of different reasons to do that. But the environment, I could definitely see that becoming bigger.
Well, that's another aspect that I hadn't considered is that creation of communities around assets
Yeah.
of some kind. For example, I might be really interested in sailing, but I don't have the capability of buying a yacht, and therefore creating a community around a particular boat. Maybe somebody has a very nice boat would be really interesting. Let's say it's an old schooner of some kind from the 19th century, a wooden sailor. It'd be interesting to use that as a formation of a community.
So we're part of a community. I think there's 4,000 people meeting up. I think it's next week in Austin, and that's to fly kites. That's a community, right? And some people have more than one kite. They may want to share it on Rockify. And again, it's not about making money. It's just about meeting like-minded people and allowing people to learn and experience what you're doing. So what a great way to get into kite flying than to Rockify it. Again, you're not paying as much, and you're getting to try before you buy things. So we're starting to fit in. Communities are asking us to become part of them. So to facilitate this kind of sharing.
I could imagine, if I saw something about kite flying, I might say, hey, I'd like to try that for one evening, and to be able to go out there
Yeah.
with people who are more knowledgeable about me and who are willing to share their experience as well as rent their kites to me. I might
Yeah.
go out and do that for an evening and just see because if we look at the other kind of market, the tourism market in which people go for experiences or to learn about a place. They may go to a historical site and they want to talk about what's happening at that site. So it sounds like that would align nicely with the kinds of individuals who are looking for meaningful experiences.
Absolutely. Yeah. It goes again from that need to rent to want to rent, right? So, an experience is, I want to rent that. I don't need to rent it, but I want to. So, yeah, it's just that change.
Wow, quite a bit of changes happening. Everything from the impact on the economy to sharing to changes of business models. Very cool. Steve, I want to thank you for joining us today and talking about the sharing economy and how that could have fundamental impacts on both society, and I'll say actually more than just the society, but also the economy and the environment. Very cool. Thank you
Yeah.
for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you.